Everyone tells you that motivation is the key. Wake up motivated, stay motivated, chase motivation. But here's the part nobody wants to admit. If motivation actually worked, you wouldn't keep needing it. Think about it. Anything that truly works produces consistent results. You don't need to get motivated to brush your teeth. You don't need inspiration to check your phone. You just do it. So why is it that the most important things in your life are the ones you need motivation for? Because motivation is not a system, it's a feeling. And feelings are one of the least reliable drivers of human behavior. There's a theory in psychology called the self-determination theory. It's one of the most respected frameworks for understanding human motivation, developed by psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan. And it says something that completely contradicts what most people believe. There are two types of motivation. Intrinsic motivation, doing something because you genuinely enjoy it. Extrinsic motivation, doing something because of rewards, pressure, or outcomes. Now, here's the problem. Most of what you're told online is extrinsic motivation. Make more money, prove them wrong, become successful. It sounds powerful, but research shows it doesn't last. In fact, in multiple studies, when people were given external rewards for tasks they already enjoyed, their motivation actually decreased over time. This is known as the overjustification effect. The reward replaces the internal drive. So instead of wanting to do something, you start needing a reason to do it. And once that reason disappears, so do you. In one study, children who loved drawing were split into two groups. One group was told they'd receive a reward for drawing. The other drew for no reward. 2 weeks later, researchers measured who still drew voluntarily. The rewarded group, their interest dropped by 50%. The unrewarded group, no change. External motivation killed internal drive. And this replicates across domains. Students paid for grades perform worse long-term. Employees rewarded for creativity produce less creative work. Athletes focused on trophies enjoy their sport less. The pattern is consistent. External motivation works short-term, but long-term, it destroys the behavior you're trying to reinforce. That's your first problem with motivation. It doesn't build consistency. It builds dependency. Now, let's go deeper. There's another chemical everyone talks about when it comes to motivation, dopamine. Most people think dopamine is the reward chemical. It's not. Research in neuroscience shows dopamine is more about anticipation than reward. It spikes before you get something, not after. That means your brain gets excited about the idea of success before you actually do anything, which explains something strange. You can watch a motivational video, feel fired up, start imagining your future success, and then do nothing because your brain already experienced the reward. This has been demonstrated in studies where anticipation of a reward produced stronger dopamine responses than the reward itself. Research using fMRI scans measured dopamine spikes in two conditions, anticipating a reward versus receiving it. Anticipation produced dopamine spikes 400% higher than the reward itself. Your brain gets more excited imagining success than achieving it, which means motivational content gives you the neurochemical hit without requiring any actual work. So when you constantly consume motivation, you're triggering the feeling of progress without making progress, and your brain can't always tell the difference. That's why motivation feels productive, but often isn't. Now, here's where it becomes even more controversial. Motivation doesn't just fail to help you, it can actively slow you down because it trains you to wait. You wait to feel ready. You wait to feel inspired. You wait for the right mood. But research in behavioral psychology shows something very different about how action works. Action doesn't follow motivation. Motivation follows action. In a well-known model by B.J. Fogg, behavior happens when three things align: motivation, ability, and a prompt. But here's the key insight people miss. If motivation is low, you can still act by lowering the difficulty, meaning action doesn't depend on motivation, it depends on how easy you make the behavior. This is why habits outperform motivation every time. Habits don't require emotional energy, they require structure, and there's strong data to support this. A study from University College London found that habits take on average 66 days to form, not 21 like popular culture suggests, but the range? 18 to 254 days, depending on complexity. The critical finding, once a behavior became automatic, motivation became irrelevant. The habit triggered regardless of emotional state. No willpower required, no inspiration needed, no motivation necessary. Automaticity replaced motivation entirely. But more importantly, once formed, they operate with minimal conscious effort. No hype, no inspiration, no motivation. Just repetition. Now compare that to motivation, which requires constant emotional input every single day. That's not sustainable.
And this is where most people get stuck in a loop. They feel unmotivated, so they seek motivation. They feel good temporarily, then crash again and repeat. It's not because they're lazy, it's because they're using the wrong tool. But here's something even more uncomfortable. The entire self-improvement industry is built on motivation because motivation sells. It's exciting. It's emotional. It feels like change. And there's an entire industry built on keeping you dependent on it. A $13 billion motivational industry. Motivational speakers, inspiration podcasts, daily affirmation apps, goal-setting courses, vision board templates, all selling you the same cycle. Feel bad, consume motivation, feel good temporarily, crash, repeat. It's not a bug. It's the business model. Because if motivation actually worked, you'd buy it once and be done. But sustainable systems, those don't require subscriptions. They don't need daily content. They don't create emotional dependency. So the industry doesn't sell you systems. It sells you feelings over and over. And you keep buying because the crash is built in. The motivation wears off by design. So you come back for more. But real change is boring. And boring doesn't go viral. Studies on goal pursuit have shown that people who rely heavily on emotional states are more likely to procrastinate and abandon long-term goals. Why? Because emotions fluctuate. Sleep, stress, environment, social pressure, all of it affects how you feel. So if your productivity depends on motivation, your productivity depends on variables you can't control. That's a losing game. Now, let's flip this completely. If motivation doesn't work, why do some people still succeed? It's not because they're more motivated. In fact, studies on high performers show something surprising. They experience resistance just like everyone else. They just don't treat it as a signal to stop. They treat it as irrelevant. Because they rely on systems, not feelings. They design their environment so the right behavior is the easiest option. They reduce friction. They remove decisions. They automate actions. So instead of asking, do I feel like doing this? They ask, is this what I do?
So instead of chasing motivation, you replace it with systems, with habits, with structure. Now here's the final truth most people won't tell you. Motivation feels like the beginning of change, but most of the time, it's the substitute for it. It gives you the emotional payoff without the physical effort. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. So the next time you feel unmotivated, don't try to fix the feeling. Ignore it. Lower the barrier. Make the task easier. Start small. Because action creates momentum, not the other way around. And here's what nobody wants to hear. The people who achieve the most aren't the ones who feel the most motivated. They're the ones who built systems that work regardless of how they feel. They removed motivation from the equation entirely.
because they realized something uncomfortable. Relying on motivation is like relying on weather. Sometimes it's there, most of the time it's not. And you can't build a life waiting for perfect conditions. So stop chasing motivation. Start building structure. Stop waiting to feel ready. Start making it so easy you can't say no. Because motivation is what amateurs wait for. Systems are what professionals build. And the gap between the two, that's the difference between wanting to change and actually changing. Get the order right.